Welcome to Pretty Brook Presents. And today, Pretty Brook presents an interview with children's author Nesha Ausby. I'm going to talk to her about her children's book entitled My Deaf Friend Can Do Anything You Can Do. And obviously, from the title, I was really intrigued about what her connection is to the deaf community, and why she was passionate about writing a book about the subject. So take a listen. Okay, so thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I did a little bit of an introduction in advance, and I mentioned the title of your book, My Deaf Friend Can Do Anything You Can Do. So when I saw the title, I instantly thought, I really want to be able to talk to her about her experience and why it was that she was interested in doing a book about this. So if you could first just tell us a little bit about your book, and then we can kind of go into some of the other details.
Okay, so my name is Nesha Ausby. I'm the author of My Deaf Friend Can Do Anything You Can Do. The book is pretty much about the two main characters. One is deaf and one is hearing. And throughout the book, it's pretty much teaching you how deaf people go about their everyday lives, because a lot of people have the misconception that deaf people can't do certain things like drive, watch TV, listen to music. So that's what my book is about. And also, as far as the hearing character, that's kind of me. I'm a CODA, which means child of deaf adult. So in the story, the hearing character, she is best friends with the deaf child, the deaf
character.
Right. So it kind of intertwines with pretty much me and my mom, because my mom is deaf. So that's what made me write the story, because of so many misconceptions and a lot of it also kind of covers bullying, where you have that deaf person that may not have certain friends or certain people that just doesn't want to talk to them, or just because they can't communicate with them. And throughout the book, once children, even adults, because I want adults to read it too, because adults, they don't know, and it's all about learning. A lot of people don't know certain things, so that's what the book is about.
That's amazing. And so you were saying that it's came out of your experience with growing up with your mother. So can you talk a little bit about that and how it was? And before you go into that, I mean, is there, just for my knowledge, is there a difference between, some people say deaf, some people say hearing impaired? Is there a distinction, or is it the same thing?
Yes, that is a very important question. So deaf people, so you have some deaf people that they're partially deaf, and then you have some that are deaf. But the majority of deaf people do not like being called hearing impaired, or look at deafness as a disability a lot of times. So
interesting.
Deaf, they're deaf. They take pride in that. I'm deaf. They really take pride into being deaf. So as time went on, that's how names have changed. Because at first it was, back then, even people still consider as hearing impaired, or a hearing person being disabled. And you have, they used to call deaf people deaf and dumb back in the day. And now they're like stuck on deaf, like they're deaf. You know what I mean? So yeah, so there is a big difference between them being called hearing impaired and deaf.
Right. And that's I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it also made me think about the implants that some people are able to get. And I don't know, I guess there's some situations in which you can and which you can't, but I've heard that there are some people who will say, like you said before, I'm part of this community, I don't necessarily want that. I mean, has that been your experience in terms of,
So even because I'm in college now to become a sign language interpreter, and there are still a few things that I
Oh,
didn't know. So as being in class, taking a deaf culture class, there is you have some people back then when the implants first came about, you had deaf people that actually disowned those that got the implant. But now when now that time has gone on, they're accepted because at the end of the day, they're still deaf. Even if you have that implant, you're still deaf. If you didn't have that implant in, you're still deaf. So
I see. Okay.
mhm.
So that's interesting. Okay. And does your mom have a particular stance on any of these issues?
She doesn't. She used to have a hearing aid a long time ago, and she told
Okay.
me she does not like her hearing aid, and she likes the way she is. So,
Gotcha. Uh-huh. I hear you. I hear you. And so I kind of went off on a tangent. You were telling me a little bit about your experience growing up with a mother with who is deaf.
yeah. So the main reason this is why I wrote this book. This is why I want to become a interpreter, not only interpreter, a Black interpreter, because
Mm-hmm.
growing up, they will always consider me as her interpreter, just because that's my mom and I know sign language, and that shouldn't be the case. There's not a lot of granted, there's interpreters, we need more interpreters, but there's not a lot of Black interpreters. And my mom friends would always say, when you gonna become an interpreter? We
Oh,
need more Black
really?
interpreters. And yeah, and even like there's times where like not probably a couple years ago, my mom was in the hospital, or even doctor's appointment, they would look to me to interpret for her. And it's like, well, what if I interpret the wrong thing? I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
professional interpreter.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, that's what I'm going to school for. Yes, I know sign language, but I'm not
Right.
certified. I don't have that piece of paper saying you are certified to interpret it for someone.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, that was a big thing for me. So that's why I really want to become a sign language interpreter. In this book, I want to get it out so people can learn about the different misconceptions that people have about deaf people. Because growing up, the question was always, "Oh, how does your mom know how to dance so good?" And my mom, she really can dance. So
Okay.
they're like, "Why? How does she dance so well?" And then I'm like, "It's the vibrations in the music. She can feel the
Mm-hmm.
beat. She's on beat all the time." So that growing up, it's challenging, but it was also a blessing because now here I am doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know before that you were going to school to get it's called a certification.
I'm getting my degree as to become a sign interpreter.
Oh wow. Okay, I see. And so is there a particular reason you think why there aren't that many Black signs interpreters? Do you
You
have
know,
a sense of why that is?
a lot of the stories that I hear is because certain school. Okay, think about this. Like certain schools only like high schools. Only certain high schools offer a sign language course.
Ah, yeah,
Black
that's true.
schools don't really offer different languages at that. Not
Yes.
saying that I know that for a fact. That's just how I feel.
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, that's because a lot of times I hear people, yeah, I took a sign language course in high school and I wanted to do sign language ever since. I wanted to be an interpreter. I hear that story a lot. So that's my concept. My concept. I don't know if that's a fact, but that's how I always looked at it. And even with my mom, whenever different things, when she needed an interpreter, it was always a Caucasian person.
Right.
I hardly ever see an African American. So
That's interesting. I mean, I hadn't really thought about that. And in terms of the cultural parts of it too, in terms of interpreting stuff, I could find that to be helpful, you know.
mhm.
So that people who might be interested in doing what you're going to school to do right now, can you tell us what you would need to do in order to be able to do that? What kinds of things, you're going to college now, but the skill set that you would need to be able to bring.
So I feel, and that's another thing. I really don't know a lot of colleges that offer sign language courses, but because I'm in Maryland and we're close to DC, where DC has more of a deaf
Oh,
community.
yes. Yes.
Um, so here we have Catonsville Community College, where you can either get your certification, or you can get your full-blown associate's degree for sign language, or even at Towson University. I do get that same question a lot, and I couldn't. One, to get started, to even know sign language, first and foremost, do your research, look up videos, get the books, and the most important thing, when as far as learning from someone, a lot of deaf people suggest that you're being taught by a deaf person, because a deaf person, they can they're deaf. They know their language more than a hearing person would. So, and that's something I learned also. But yeah, it's hard. As I've started my business, TC 11 Hands, I've had a few people. They have said that they're taking courses in different states. So it all depends on where you live, and if they're offering sign language courses.
Wow. Okay. And how long will it take you for you to finish and get your degree?
For me, I feel like it would take me about 2 more years.
Okay. Okay.
And
That's great. That's great. And then so you'll have the certification, and then what are you planning to do with your certification?
So what I want to do, I want to get my feet wet into the interpreting field, but I also want to start my own business agency, interpreting agency. So after I get that degree, I'll be going back to college to get for business.
Wow.
So I can, I really want to open my own agency for interpreters.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. Okay. You would have other folks doing the same kind of thing, kind of going out, I guess, if there's interpreters that are needed for what, like courts or those kind of things. Oh, interesting. Wow. Okay. Wow, that's really cool. So you really turned, I mean, you're author and, interpreter. I mean, you're really turning this into a whole lot of different kinds of things. That's amazing.
Thank you.
That is really amazing. That's amazing. So is there anything you wanted to mention about the community, or like your experiences growing up with it, or anything else that I may have missed?
I would say just take the time to get, deaf people, they can be, they're just like us. They do everything we can do, anything we can do. So treat them as if they were just like you. They can do everything. They can drive. A lot of people have that misconception. Why are they driving? That's dangerous. You got to think about when you're driving. Imagine if your music's blasting really loud, and you can't hear it, but you see those lights and those sirens going off. So then you hear, oh, there's an ambulance. It's the same thing. So I just want to bring more awareness to the deaf community, and I don't want to make it as if, because I'm not deaf, I'm hearing, of course. So I never want to take credit from the deaf community, even though I am part of the deaf community in a way.
Right.
But just look at them as a saying. They can do anything that you can do. That's why I wrote this story. So.
And is that because of your experiences with your mom, do you feel like it hasn't been the case sometimes that people, well, I know you had said something about people looking to you to be her interpreter. Do people has it been your experience that people kind of will brush her aside and look to you? Is that why, and is that one of the reasons why you focused on writing this book, to explain to people?
Yes. And also because even with family or friends, you have hearing people, and then you have the deaf person that's just sitting there, and no one, everybody's conversating, and then you have the deaf person just sitting there, and everybody's laughing, kikiing, and not really telling her or telling the deaf person what's going on, and it's like you're leaving them out. So Learn sign language. I mean, even if you learn the alphabet, like I feel like I personally would appreciate it. I can sign to someone, or a deaf person would appreciate it, at least that you know sign language or you know something, because you, as any human being, doesn't like feeling left out. So if you guys are he and then you have the deaf person sitting there and they're asking, oh, what's funny, what's going on, and then a lot of times you have the hair people, I'll tell you later. Oh, I'll tell you in a little bit. It's not right. It's not right.
Right. And so you would recommend, if people were interested in learning, you could start with the videos. I think you mentioned that before. To start with videos online, know someone who is part of the deaf community, they can kind of help you as well, that kind of thing.
But my very first suggestion, a deaf person should be teaching you.
Okay.
Like, and because I mean, here, a deaf person should be there's, or even if it's like a hearing interpreter, someone that really knows what they're doing. But a lot of times, the people in the deaf community, their first suggestion is you need to learn from a deaf person.
Okay, that's really helpful. And you know, what really struck me too, one of the reasons why I have been doing, well, my main reason for doing these videos, these interviews, is that my daughter has Rett syndrome. And that's the reason why I call it Pretty Brooke, because Rett is in the middle of the word pretty. And when she's nonverbal, and she's 5 years old. And that's one of the things that it struck me when you said, you know, people will say, oh, I'll tell you later or whatever. My daughter understands, she's just nonverbal. And it's just, there are times when it kind of does feel like, okay, she's not necessarily part of the conversation. She's kind of sitting there, and then other people are having the conversation, and it's like, oh, okay, we'll focus on it later. But it's so much better for her, if you're part of the community, you know, part of the conversation or whatever the case may be. So that really struck me when you said that. So, yeah.
It makes a big difference. Because my mom, and even myself, I'm not perfect. So sometimes I would notice, like, wait, my mom's right there. Let me hold on. You hold that thought for a second. Let me tell her what we're talking about. Like,
yes,
so it can be challenging sometimes, but I always try to make sure my mom is included, because I wouldn't want to feel like that. No one wants to feel like that.
Right. It sounds like you're an awesome daughter. That's so nice.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm crying.
Yes. Well, you're doing it.
Thank you.
Well, that's great. I just wanted to kind of, like I said, when I saw your book, I was really excited to talk to you about it. And so thank you so much for talking to me about your book. And I want to say it again, make sure I get it up here. My Deaf Friend Can Do Anything You Can Do. And so where will people be able to get it?
Okay, so you can always go on my website, www.tclovinghands.com. That's another thing. TC stands for my mother's initials, so that's why I got TC.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So you can either order it through me, and if you order through me, you get signed copies, or you can also order it Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, and I believe Target. But it's everywhere, and it's also in a few libraries. I feel like it's definitely here in Baltimore County, and it's also, I feel like it's in a library in Indiana, I think.
Oh wow! Okay. Oh wow! Well, thank you so much. Well, I'm gonna I have to pick up my copy too, because I just think it's so awesome, and and thank you so much for talking to me. I learned a lot about the deaf community, and so I hope you're okay with this, because one of the things that I had one of the reasons why I do a lot of the stuff that I do is I focus on a lot of times with the disability community. But what I'm learning from you is that the deaf community is saying that they don't want to be considered part of the disability community. So I think that this is helpful for people to know that information too.
Thank you for having
With
me.
that.
I enjoyed talking to you.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Bye. So there you have it. That was wonderful. I really appreciated talking to Nesha Ausby about her book, My Deaf Friend Can Do Anything You Can Do. And she mentioned where you can purchase the book. And she talked a lot. I learned a lot about the deaf community and honestly not being part of the disability community. So I appreciate her telling me that. I didn't know any of that information. I love learning. if you didn't know that, I love learning new information. And so knowing about, you know, how to get a degree in interpretation and being an interpreter, and just her experiences with the community, and just all of the things that she had to say. But I didn't realize that there weren't that many African American interpreters. It's just it was an enlightening conversation. I really appreciated it. So if you like this conversation as well, feel free to like it and share this video and comment. And I will see you next time on Pretty Brook Presents.